Show is available live on the We Are Paradox Network every Wednesday and Thursday starting at 7 p.m. Pacific. The opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and its guests, and they do not necessarily reflect those of the other hosts, the management, the network, or any affiliated stations.
I don't know what that means.
It means that if you have a problem with this show, you should probably just contact me rather than bothering anybody else. This is a live show. Oops. What's going on there? Well, we've got a little bit of trouble with our audio, Vince, here on the introduction, so probably just not worry about what anybody thinks.
What does that mean?
Let's just go ahead and get started.
All right, go. We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live.
And now for the meat and potatoes. Okay, Vince, let's see here. Let's get you back up. Let's get you back up. There we go. We've got Vince on the line here. We've got me on the line here. For whatever reason, Vince, the whole computer just decided to make a little weird kooky thing there for a minute, and that's just the way it goes. We're paranormal people, so we're going to say that's the reason, right?
That's always the reason.
It's
why else would batteries run out? Why else would electronics go haywire? It's the undead. Aliens. Interdimensional foot.
It really does come down to a couple of different things. It's like, whenever you really get started with these different types of things, you find out that strange things happen, and which is kind of an interesting thing to start about, because we're going to talk about what's called the Chehalis saucer party today, and there's lots of S noises in there, so that's going to create maybe some problems for me eventually. I'm not very good with S's sometimes. But let's start off by saying our guest today is Vince Ynzunza, right? Is that right? Is that a pretty close approximate? Yeah. No?
Ynzunza.
I don't know how I get that wrong. I get it wrong every time, and I spelled your name wrong, and then I had to fix it, and I apologize. But you are like a Chehalis boy born and raised, aren't you?
Well, not born in Chehalis. I was born in Edmonds, Washington. And I spent the bulk of my wonder years living in a town called Rochester in Washington, very close to Centralia and Chehalis. But I spent a lot of my formative years in Centralia and Chehalis. They're known as the Twin Cities, and I learned a lot there. And a lot of my fondest childhood memories actually come from Chehalis, Washington. So I consider it a home region rather than a hometown.
Right. And so at what point in time did you become enamored with the paranormal? Was there a certain event, or was it more of a thing where I was mainly watching a lot of shows, listening to Art Bell? Was it that kind of stuff that actually got into it, or was it like some people? No, I saw this light out in my yard and I couldn't explain what it is, and so I went on this sort of lifelong quest.
Right. Well, it's really a combination of the two, because I honestly do not remember ever not being interested in this type of the macabre, the weird things that go bump in the night, all of that. It feels like that has always been a part of me. So I've got like two answers for that. One, I do specifically remember this event, this moment that happened to me as a very young child. I had to have been maybe 4 years old. I was living in Rochester, Washington at the time. And I remember being in bed, and I look up, and at the foot of my bed is this entity, this figure standing there staring at me. And I remember it had like uh, a large head and really kind of big piercing eyes, and its skin was blue.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom told me years later that I told her that the blue boy had come into my room and had stared at me the night before. And for at least a couple weeks, I was terrified to go back into my bedroom because the blue boy was in there. And this is such a like a primordial memory of mine. Like I'm not even sure how much of it I actually truly remember, or
Right.
how much I remember was told to me. You know how early memory is like that. But really, for as long as I can remember being me, I was checking out books on the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and UFOs and even like the classic movie monsters from the early 20th century, Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and all that. And I was just at the right age when X-Files came out. I think that came out when I was like 11 or something. Got into that. Watched the show Sightings. Got to be a bit late in my teenage years. Discovered Art Bell. All of this was really it seemed natural to me, and I loved it. But it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago that I really started wearing that on my sleeve.
Yeah.
When I started my show Pacific North Weird, and started kind of I guess being more true to myself, while also cognitively shaping that as my identity.
Right. Right.
Like people nowadays know me as the Bigfoot guy or the UFO guy or whatever, and
Right.
that's on purpose, because that's pretty much all I post on Facebook now.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, Vince, because I think I have contacted you before because I think I heard your story about the Blue Boy on another network when you were talking with Dave Scott. And,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, no, that's exactly, well, not exactly, but very similar to the experience I had at the same age in Ireland whenever I was growing up.
But,
And so it is one of those things where you do get into a scenario where you start to knowingly or unknowingly start to try to figure out exactly what's going on, and the idea of this happening to you at a young age, and it sounds like your mom was not positive or negative about it too much, but she allowed you to sort of have interest in that wasn't like, oh, you're not going to talk about that ever, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. And
yeah.
so when you had ended up dealing with all this stuff and then deciding at a certain point in time, and I think in a lot of ways we all do that are in a public face of this field, we all realize there's just no point in not just saying everything that ever happened to us and to try to explore that. And so I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because you've really done a lot of different things over the years with your channel, which you can find it at, is it pacificnorthweird.com, and that takes you to your that takes you to your YouTube channel. And some of the things that you've done are kind of very serious, and some of them are kind of tongue in cheek. And so, have you found that which I prefer, to be honest with you, because I think that I think it's interesting to be able to look at the types of things that we do sometimes and say that's kind of funny. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, and I'm not belittling anybody who goes outside and looks for UFOs or has encountered a UFO or, you know, or looking for a Bigfoot. But, you know, the third day into looking for a Bigfoot, you kind of think, you know, this might be a little bit ridiculous. You know what I mean? And so, and even though I believe that I've seen a Bigfoot in the past and I've seen all kinds of crazy stuff like that, I mean, it's just like, you know, at a certain point in time, you can look at it and say, you know, is this elusive thing not showing up because maybe it's not? I mean, you get into this big existential question about maybe I'm not seeing it because I'm not supposed to see it, and maybe this is the big sort of, you know, philosophy of life, this sort of, you know, postmodernistic, you know, idea of what reality is, and all these different things like that, where, you know, so it is kind of funny, but
well, that right there is funny, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it is in a way, and so, I've always liked the fact that when we have talked to each other and we've met each other before and kind of hung out a little bit. And when we've talked, it's not so serious in the fact that, you know, you know, it's just so dry in the way that you're presenting information that somebody can't take a look at it and say, okay, I really like the way that, especially you and Tyler, your friend, when you guys are doing your little road shows and stuff like that, where you're going and you know, and then you stop over at somebody's house and then you're sleeping at, you know, Bigfoot Books and Willow Creek or something like that. That's kind of an interesting thing. And then the next day you're up doing this and kind of looking for weird stuff and you know, that's kind of a cool thing. It's not the destination, you know, it's the journey in a lot of ways. And I think that's really how you have to do it when you're dealing with cryptids or UFOs or something like that, simply because of the fact that you don't know if you're going to find it at the end of it. So you might as well enjoy the process.
Yes, and so I'm going to make a huge announcement right now. You heard it first, that Pacific North Weird, my YouTube channel, we are never going to prove that Bigfoot is real. We are never going to prove that extraterrestrial life exists. But the reason why the show is amazing and fun to watch is because it's all about the pursuit of that. It's about that journey that you're talking about right now. And that journey should be funny.
Yeah.
There should be humor in it. Every single facet of our human lives is ripe for comedy and lampooning. Our careers, our love, war, all the terrible things that happen in humanity and all the great things that happen in humanity are all inspirations for laughter.
Yeah.
Why not the pursuit of the esoteric?
Yeah.
What makes that any different? And the only thing I can think of is that there are a lot of people who use the paranormal, use their experiences with the paranormal to make themselves feel unique and special.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you know, that they don't feel as such in more traditional avenues of life.
Right.
So, like, you know, sometimes when you have fun with something like that people take gravely serious, you have fun with things that might threaten their sense of self, people get upset about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you anytime you make a joke about Bigfoot or the UFOs or anything like that, or ghosts, you know, you're gonna get that. But
yeah, and I think you're right in the fact that, and I will get a little philosophical here, in the fact that the people who oftentimes have a problem with you making a joke about it are very unsure of their position within this sort of stratosphere. I mean, you can crack a joke with Dr. Meldrum. He doesn't care. I mean, you know, he thinks it's funny. but there are certain people who take on this sort of, and I don't know how to say it. I'm not going to say this about Bigfoot people or whatever, but they do take on this sort of, I am the law of this, or I am the mouthpiece of this, and so therefore
I have the truth.
Yeah,
People need to listen.
Yeah. And I think that's funny because they don't understand it in a few ways that humor is the last sort of bastion of fighting back. I mean, and you can see that in politics and everything else. I mean, sometimes that's all you have is just a way to, do that. And so to question that, it makes some people very uncomfortable, but that's why you should do it. I mean, it's
definitely, but and I'll add to that too that we're under this really weird cultural assumption that if you have humor with something, that means you're disrespecting it,
right?
Automatically, and that has never made any sense to me. Like the humor that we mine from Bigfoot, UFOs, from the paranormal, it doesn't make fun of anyone. It's not making fun of anything. What it's doing is laughing at like this weird thing that we're doing,
right? This
weird shared experience. We're part of the community that we're quote unquote making fun of.
Right.
I'm the weirdo that's at every single UFO, Bigfoot, paranormal convention.
Yeah.
And I buy money. I buy shirts, for like a ghost conference stuff, and that's all I wear. And hell yeah, I'm gonna laugh at myself and laugh at the situation because life is worth laughing at.
Well, I think that's the thing that's really important to realize is that you do go to almost every Paracon that you can make it to. And so, yeah. And so, and you report on it and you do make a video and you try to, you promote that. And so therefore, you're doing a service to different things. And I know that you do have a private life and you do have a fiance and everything like that now. And so it's a good thing that she's sort of with you. But we won't, and it's nice to have somebody to do that with that sort of gets it, to understand that type of thing. Although, the thing that I found now lately is, in British footballers' lives, they have wags, right? Wives and girlfriends. You probably shouldn't talk about that. You probably shouldn't talk about that too much because of the fact, unless they're cool with it, because otherwise then, somebody can say, oh, well, that's Kevin's wife and he's a nut, or whatever. And so therefore she has to, my wife has to defend my kind of weirdness all the time. And, maybe that's
what love is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It truly is. It truly is. But the Chehalis Saucer Party is coming up on the 21st of September. So it's not very far away. Not very far away. But you guys have done a massive amount of work to try to make this an event that I think is severely underknown. Is this the first year, or is this? I mean, that's something I don't even know. I don't believe this is the first year, but I can't really think of anything in my mind that says this is, this has had, this kind of notoriety put around it as I think it should.
Yeah, it is the first year
of
the
Chehalis
okay. Saucer Party, but it feels like it shouldn't be because this is such an important story that we are honoring with this event. So I understand your confusion.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is true is that as you go around areas with UFO stuff in the Pacific Northwest, there's a couple of main events that are talked about all the time. One is the Maury Island incident, and I hate saying the word incident, but that's just the way that UFO people do it.
Yeah.
And then
Well, I
there's
mean, yeah, Google. You want to find
yeah,
out.
I know. I mean, what else are you going to call it? But that's fine. But it just seems like that's a little, it's almost like it's become a parody of itself now. Anytime you want to say anything, it's like, oh, it's the I went to the Jack in the Box incident or or whatever. But and then there's the Kenneth Arnold sightings, and maybe you could, or we could talk about the two of those together and how they may be somewhat related in the event of how they happened, and why is it that Roswell, New Mexico, is more famous than the Puget Sound area whenever it comes to UFOs. I've talked to people like the president of MUFON, and we used to do a show with Peter Davenport, and Peter Davenport would always talk about the fact that sightings in Washington were so much higher than a lot of different places. And, I've read that in a lot of different cases that according to Peter Davenport, Washington State has more UFO sightings than anywhere else. And yet we're sort of, is it because we're sort of stuck out here on the left-hand side of the country and people just don't know what we do? Or what do you think it is?
Well, I don't think it's that, because I mean you can draw a very direct parallel to Bigfoot culture, and the Pacific Northwest is the number one thing that people bring up when they talk about Bigfoot, even though Bigfoot is a nationwide phenomenon. I think in terms of the Northwest and UFO history, there's a couple of different layers and facets that you need to consider. Number one, that for the longest time, Kenneth Arnold was the most famous case talked about. Roswell, roughly 10, 11, 12 days after the Kenneth Arnold sighting on June 24th of 1947. And Roswell really wasn't a household name until the 80s, I think. 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
And it was because, a number of whistleblowers and books came out and everything. But Kenneth Arnold, for the longest time, was considered the gold standard of UFO sightings of that era, which is now known as the Summer of the Saucers, or the first big UFO wave, where it really permeated pop culture. I think before we go further into that, I should, briefly explain what the Kenneth Arnold sighting was.
Yes.
Just for anyone that is new to this. So June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold was a private pilot and a businessman, and he was flying out of the Chehalis Airport in Chehalis, Washington, and he was heading to Yakima. He was looking for a crashed plane that was somewhere in the Cascades. And during this search, he's over the town of Mineral, Washington, and he sees these 9 kind of crescent-shaped discs flying kind of from Mount Adams towards Mount Rainier. Mm-hmm. And he described them as kind of looking like, I guess, what we would think of like the Batarang and the Adam West Batman show from the 60s, even though this was way before that. And he radioed ahead, saying that he was seeing like this really bizarre aircraft. He had clocked their speed. He estimated they were flying about 1,200 miles per hour, unknown of and unimaginable at that time with aircraft. Mm-hmm. And one thing leads to another, and his stories starts to hit the newspapers. And a few days later, a reporter interviews him about this sighting, and Arnold is asked, how did these aircraft fly? And he was trying to describe like this weird motion that they were like planing through the air, you know.
Right.
And the only way he could really compare it to anything um, was to like imagine you're skipping a saucer on the water.
Right.
So the newspaper reporter essentially misquotes him and says that he saw saucer-like objects.
Right.
That actually and quickly becomes the term flying saucer,
Right.
which changed American pop culture. That entire summer, suddenly thousands of people around the United States are seeing what they describe as flying saucers.
Right.
Saucer-shaped objects, and they're flying over the White House, and they're happening in Portland, and police officers are seeing them, and farmers are seeing them, and it really became almost a sea change in the American public imagination on like the way we thought about and spoke about the concept of extraterrestrial visitors, men from Mars. You know, this wasn't Verne was writing about this stuff, you know, like decades before. But we finally had like a catch-all term to describe these aircraft.
Right.
No matter what shape they were, no matter what they were flying saucers. And
Right.
that was really like the commonly accepted phrase until the government came up with the acronym UFO a few years later.
Right. But it is interesting that when we're talking about that a few days before the Kenneth Arnold incident, then there was the Maury Island incident, and Scott Schaefer, who is a person who's going to show, I think, the movie or at least talk about it at the
he's going to show the movie.
Yeah, at the Chehalis flying saucer party. He if you don't know what that is, you know, there's a place called Burien, Washington. It's by Seattle, and there was several people who had spotted a 3, I believe, donut-shaped circular objects that were flying. Or was it 5, 6, 7?
6.
6. Okay. You get cropped off a little bit in my screen, so I couldn't see that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And so one of them looked like it was having trouble, and so it ended up sort of dispersing this hot metal slaggy type of material out of the whether there was the engine or whatever, I don't know. But anyway, so imagine a donut flying around and this thing comes out of the center of it. So it is interesting that the difference between Kenneth Arnold and the Maury Island incident is that the donut actually looked more, and if I would imagine if you were looking at that at the leading edge of the item, or from above or whatever, you could more describe that as a flying saucer than necessarily the Kenneth Arnold things. And so, anyway, so, which is an interesting story because then it turns out that the person involved in that life falls apart. You know, he makes Scott Schaefer makes the claim that the individual and the people in the family that witnessed this was the first documented case of the Men in Black, maybe in modern history.
Right.
But and so their life falls apart, and so he sort of recants, and then sort of, you know, comes back to a different scenario. Well, anyway, I'm not going to ruin it. I'm not going to ruin the story because I want people to watch the movie, but the important part about it is that something was collected by someone and then was put on a B-25 Mitchell that was supposed to be sent to someplace for analysis. That plane crashes in Kelso, Washington.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you've got in that area of Chehalis. I mean, if you put a compass point in the center of Chehalis and mark a a 50-mile radius or a 75-mile radius, you're getting a lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we tend to think about regions in terms of our own subjective nature, where really, if we are going to believe that we have otherworld visitors coming down on ships and everything, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Burien, Washington, Portland, Oregon, the entire stage of the Northwest is one little area.
Yeah,
it's one tiny area. There's no real reason to separate things based upon county, or like this stuff happened in Chehalis, but this stuff happened in Burien or Portland or a different state. These borders don't really exist if you're a foot about to step on the anthill.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not seeing this from a location out with the planet. Obviously, if you're looking down on the Pacific Northwest from a spaceship, it's not like oh well, that's the border. I can't go across that or whatever. But it is interesting.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me, Vince, that in a lot of ways, people don't realize that that native lore talks about mysterious birds that have lived on, especially the four big mountains around here. Mount Hood, Mount Adams, Mount Rainier, and Mount St. Helens, as all having some sort of master bird that lives on top of top of these different locations. And I've talked to people on the Yakima Reservation, for example, and they say, "Oh yeah." I mean, a lot of times people talk about Isetti, and they say, "Okay, I've seen this thing where it's supposed to open up and things go inside the mountain." I don't know. I've never seen that. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen that. I know you've been to Isetti, but people believe it. But what I'm saying is that they also say that there's supposed to be something like that on top of Mount Rainier or around Rainier too. So these things are not stories that get told. A lot of these things they just don't get told into the modern sort of zeitgeist when we're talking about it. But it doesn't surprise native peoples at all whenever you talk about that kind of stuff. That you would be able to see a UFO or a flying saucer that went in one place to another place. I mean, they just say, okay, yeah, it's always been doing that. What took you so long to figure that out?
Right. Tell me something I didn't know. Right.
Yeah, and so that's the thing that's kind of a kind of an interesting thing, and the same thing with UFOs and sometimes with stories of Bigfoot, we don't tend to necessarily listen to the stories very carefully about some of the locations that, or some of the things that were characteristics that these beings could have. And I'm not, that's just my interpretation. And I'm only saying that because I'm a teacher. I teach at a school. I have a degree in Native American education, and I deal with folklore a lot, and those kind of stories. So that's kind of what I like to do when I'm not trying to do nerdy stuff on the internet with the paranormal. I try to collect folklore stories, but
I love that stuff.
Yeah, and because I think it's important, because whether it's true or not is irrelevant, is sort of irrelevant to me, because it's somebody's spiritual belief, and so therefore history is history in the way that you remember it in some ways.
Well, it's very true in the way that it needs to be. A piece of folklore is simply like the personality of a culture.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that that is a very true thing. That's a very tangible thing, and that's something that can be studied, and it's beautiful, and it's I think in most parts probably based in some way on tangible things that physically happened in this world,
Right.
or maybe like other worlds. I don't know. I don't know the nature of physics or metaphysics, but yeah, no, that stuff has some tangible has a tangible reality that you can really touch.
Yeah. And so how do we, as people who are talking about saucer lore and saucer parties and everything like that, take this and not make it into folklore? Or is that what you think is happening at Roswell, for example? Do you think that this is now the folklore of Roswell as a 50-year-old myth, or not myth? I mean, obviously, I don't want to say it like that, because I don't want to take it away from anybody who's saying it. But now we've got this sort of ingrained response about this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and now anytime you bring out any kind of new information that upsets the apple cart, then you're sort of looked on as somebody who's sort of a naysayer. Is that something that you think that we, it's a modern day thing, and is that something that you're trying to protect against? I know you're doing a lot of work with the museum itself, the Lewis County Museum, and
Yeah.
and is that something that you're trying to take it from one stand to the other stand, or how are you trying to protect against sort of the legend of Kenneth Arnold creeping in, and or are you? And have you learned some things about Kenneth Arnold in the past that maybe is not common knowledge to people now?
Yeah, so I would say that where I come from, I am in one way I am a historian, where I want to take things that tangibly happened, that we can prove happened, or even that people said happened, but they affected something. I want to be able to document that and tell that story. Mm-hmm. I'm ultimately a storyteller. I love regional history. At the same time, I don't really think folklore necessarily encroaches upon that. I think they really are. History and folklore can live side by side. And they should live side by side, because they're just like simply just different ways of, with the Kenneth Arnold thing, there's the documented journalistic reality, and then there's the mythology.
Right.
I'm okay with both existing, and the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party is really celebrating both. Tangibly, you can say that Kenneth Arnold said he saw something, described it to the newspapers, that created the term flying saucer, that changed American pop culture.
Yes.
There's no question about that. That is historic fact.
Right.
That happened. That is merely us studying etymology and the history of science fiction and pop culture concepts of extraterrestrial visitors. Whether or not, what Kenneth Arnold saw was really extraterrestrials, or whether or not Mount Rainier is a beacon and magnet for metaphysical, mystical happenings, that's more folklore and mythology. But they both sprang from the same incident,
right,
or from the same concept.
Right.
They're both very important. I want both to live. I love both. I like to celebrate both. In terms of things about Kenneth Arnold that I have learned, there's actually a heck of a lot more to him than just his initial sighting. And one aspect of Kenneth Arnold that I find really fascinating is that after this flying saucer sighting, he became kind of a nationwide celebrity, and for a while became like a under the employ of Ray Palmer, who magazine, which was this really great little periodical that talked about just strange, esoteric, weird stuff in the country, around the world. And Fate magazine would send Kenneth Arnold around the country to interview UFO eyewitnesses who had really bizarre stories.
Wow.
One of the stories that, Kenneth Arnold covered was the Maury Island incident, which supposedly happened 3 days prior, although it was not reported until well after Kenneth Arnold's
right.
sighting. But that was a big thing. There's another really bizarre case actually 3 years later that also happened or was reported to have happened in Lewis County in 1950 that Kenneth Arnold was sent to report on. That one came from this man named Samuel Eaton Thompson. He was a Centralia resident. Centralia is right by Chehalis. And he said in late March of 1950, he was driving down some back roads near Mineral. Remember, Mineral is
right.
the town Kenneth Arnold was above when he saw his saucers.
Right.
Samuel is driving down this country road and decides to pull off on a logging road and gets out of his car, walks into the woods, and sees this weird double fused saucer in the trees, and it's surrounded by naked people.
Mm.
And Samuel walks up to them, and suddenly there's an entire family of nude people who are kind of dirty and Aryan, sort of. Like, imagine a bunch of, like, crusty, naked hippie ABBA members, like, out in the woods,
Yeah.
Frolicking around. And these people invited him onto their spacecraft and revealed to him that they were from the planet Venus, and that they were traveling the galaxy to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ in AD.
Right.
And that's a story that is one of the weirdest UFO stories ever. It's kind of known as the nudist from Venus. But, like, this is the type of stuff that Kenneth Arnold would be called upon. It's like, okay, you need to fly back to Lewis County and talk to this guy who saw a bunch of naked aliens on a spaceship.
Well,
like, what an interesting life.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, in a lot of ways, that predates Adamski's idea of people living from Venus, and in a lot of ways. And so it's interesting that we are dealing with a certain amount of stuff that we're finding right in this local generalized area that then goes and becomes reported in other areas. And people will say, well, the first time anybody was ever abducted and was told that people were from Venus is Adamski. And it sounds like that this location, whether and I don't know why, seems to be this location where people experience some weird stuff. Now, whenever they're explaining this, now I just want to clarify it. These two fused saucers being together. So, would you classify that as just the top of a plate and the bottom of a plate, that like that, or is it like a McDLT versus a Big Mac?
More like those city buses that are kind of fused together. Oh
yeah, okay, right.
Take treacherous corners more
right.
safely. So it's two saucers side by side. Like I'm gonna take these two tarot cards here,
Yeah.
like two sauces like that.
Yeah. So articulated in some way in
Yes, articulated.
yeah. And okay. Yeah, I didn't know that part about it. And you are making you were planning on making a film of this, or sort of a recreation of that. Have you gotten anywhere close to getting that accomplished, or is that something that you're going to be able to have done for this year's show, or is it sort of a next year's thing, maybe?
Yeah, so I've already filmed it. I've had this big filming day where we got a saucer out into the woods, and I got about maybe 13 to 14 volunteers, actors to be naked on camera and reenact certain elements of this nudist from Venus story from the point of view of Samuel Thompson.
Right.
So it's been filmed and everything, and um, I have a lot of projects on my plate. I'm intending to edit it and hopefully have it out later this year.
Right.
But yeah, it's just one of the many things that I've got footage for, and I'm just looking for the right time to release it. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're just ready to edit something.
Yeah.
But yeah. No,
Well, and I think that people don't realize is that, you'd think that filming it is the easiest part. It's not. It's not. Editing takes a massive amount of time if you're going to do it correctly, and
filming is merely going out and buying all the paints, and then you have to figure out like what do you want to paint.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right, but obviously by the time you get all the other aspects of it in, it's really hard. A lot of people don't understand that because they're used to the YouTube generation, and the YouTube is okay. I'm going to point and shoot at you. You're going to say what you got to say. I'm going to put it on YouTube. That's it. It's never edited. It's never done it. It's never really looked at in any kind of a serious way, in a sort of a cinematography aspect of it. And your work that you do is used for, for example, you guys did a show where you went to Willow Creek, and now that's being used by. My understanding of it is that's being used by the city of Willow Creek, the Chamber of Commerce, to promote Bigfoot days or whatever it's called down there.
And tourism, yeah.
Yeah, and so
yeah, we do find that like a lot of times we go out to these strange little events or little towns with a really bizarre claim to fame, and we end up creating a very professional, loving mini documentary about this place or this event. And a lot of times these places end up using our content and material to promote themselves, because oftentimes like no other film crew or production company ever has any sort of interest in this, or if they do, it's always the same type of Bigfoot video that you see on the Discovery Channel or whatever. And we had a little bit of a DIY punk rock love to it, which I think people appreciate, and it's a bit more communicative to the populace.
Well, I think you're right, so bringing that idea forward to the event on the 21st. Now, how much of a hand have you put into this? What type of an atmosphere are you going to have? Now, I know that from looking at the page, and if everybody isn't familiar with it, you should go to Chehalis Flying Saucer Party page.
Go to flying-saucer-party.org.
Okay, flying-saucer-party.org, and I'm glad you said that, because people from not around here, it's kind of like you can tell whether somebody's from the state, whether they can say Puyallup or not.
Right.
Chehalis is sort of that. Yeah. It would
That's a
be,
native word.
yeah, it would be
It's
hard
a
for
weird
some
one.
people to spell out. And so flying saucer party.org. I just want to make sure I'm
Yes.
getting that right. Okay, flying saucer party.org. Go and check it out. But when I was looking at it before, it looks like you've got several different movie events, some serious, some kind of funny. You've got a Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I love, production that you're going to show, and you're also going to have some
Two.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be.
We're playing Laser Blast and Space Mutiny from Mystery Science Theater, and they are playing back to back throughout the entire day until 8 p.m. when our premiere movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers will play.
Oh wow! So people can kind of people can go in sort of like an endless type thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
and so is this this location that you're going to show this in, is this a, are we closing down the center of Chehalis here? Is that what's happening and everybody's walking around seeing
Okay.
vendors or?
I'll break it down, kind of how it's going to work out. The Chehalis Flying Saucer Party is taking place in the heart of downtown Chehalis. It's a very small area, but essentially there are four main businesses that are participating in this. Traffic will not be shut down. There's going to be vendors at two different locations. This is happening at the Lewis County Historical Museum. There will be vendors there. There will also be an exhibit at the museum based upon Kenneth Arnold and the flying saucer pop culture that he inspired. Also at the museum, there's going to be a Kids Area 51 area with bouncy stuff and a little place where you can make your own little flying saucer pie tins. We're going to have the saucer drop there with people throwing little flying saucers into the crowd, which will have discounts to local businesses. That's all happening at the Lewis County Historical Museum. Vendors will be there, of course, like I said. A block or two away is a place called City Farm on Market Street. That is where all the speakers at throughout the day. There will also be vendors at City Farm. Down the street from there is the Chehalis Theater, which will be playing the aforementioned movies throughout the day. And then starting at 3 p.m. At McFiler's Bar and Grill, just a few blocks away, music will be happening. And after three bands play, an alien costume contest will occur. So we're getting various areas of this small downtown to be active hotspots for the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party that you are free to visit at really any time you want and just kind of enjoy whatever you feel like enjoying.
Yeah.
So we've got certain VIP passes, which gets you pretty much access to everything. And then there's individual ticket prices to either the individual speakers or the movies or entrance into the museum.
Okay. But probably you'd say the best bet would just to get a VIP pass and sort of have it all.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. It does seem like that's the best way to do things. And that's awesome that you guys are doing that. And I imagine that as things go and it'll grow, this will be it. But as far as vendors go, are you still taking application for vendors, or do you have that? Is that all set up and ready to go? Is everybody? If you full on that, or
the vendor process? Yeah, the vendor situation is pretty much all set up. I believe we are at maximum capacity with vendors. So I'm a co-organizer of this event. I'm putting it on with my buddy Jason Matson, who is the director of the Lewis County Historical Museum. Me and him have really been like spearheading this entire thing. Jason's handling more of the vendor aspects and everything, but I do believe we are likely full right now.
right?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I know my friend Jill's going to be there with all her stuff, and I'm always amazed at some of the stuff she makes. So if you get a chance to go down and see her there with her different, she makes some pretty cool looking stuff out of gourds that look like aliens. But anyway,
So I actually bought one of her alien necklaces from the McMenamins UFO Festival in McMinnville, Oregon, a few years ago, which I wear frequently, and I'll probably be wearing at the Flying Saucer Party. So yeah, no, I'm very familiar with her stuff. And
oh yeah, okay, cool, cool. I didn't want to say too much because I was I was supposed to go to the McMinnville UFO festival, and I ended up not being. It's sort of like one of those things where I always end up saying, "Oh yeah, I'll be there," and then I just can't ever seem to make it. But I really want to go to this event. But let's do this, Vince. I'm going to play the interval music. It's going to be about 7 minutes long. And then when we get back, then we'll see if anybody wants to. I know I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you, and we really haven't even sort of touched on too much, But anyway, that's how it goes whenever you're interviewing with Kevin. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm having a great.
All right, brother. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this, and we'll see you in about 7 minutes.
7 minutes. I will be here.
You are listening to On the Other Hand with Kevin Beegle on the We Are Paradox Media Network. You can find the show on Facebook at We Are Paradox Media. Also, you can hear the show on Spreaker Radio by searching We Are Paradox Media. The show will be returning shortly. We have taken a break for station affiliation. This is a live show, and the call-in number is 360-548-7070. Well, let's see. I cut that off short, but anyway, that's fine. Vince will come back in a minute. He'll be fine. That's just one of those things that happens. Let me go ahead and give you the call-in number. It's 360 548 7070. So that's 360 548 7070. And if you'd like to talk to Vince about the show, about the Flying Saucer Party, the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party, which is, again, flyingsaucer.org, then we'll go from there. One of the things that I wanted to talk to Vince about when he gets back is the different things that he's been doing with the Lewis County Museum. I know that, and it's interesting to me because I'm more of a Bigfoot guy, and that's what I'm really into more than anything. And Vince recently did some different things involving a man called Rance Mullins with his friend Tyler Bounds, and it's very interesting that the type of information that he got. Now, it sounds to me like Rance Mullins created sort of a. Did he have a book, or was it tapes that you got a hold of, or what was it exactly, Vince?
So there's this gentleman named Rant Mullins.
Rant Mullins, okay.
Rant Mullins, yeah, and he lived in Toledo, Washington, long time ago. Born in 1897, died in 1986, I believe, and he pops up in history books as a footnote in Bigfoot history every once in a while, always in relation to a much more famous man named Ray Wallace, who, of course, is kind of considered to be like the first Bigfoot hoaxer, who also lived in Toledo, Washington. And Ray Wallace was involved in the company back in 58 or whatever, where they discovered the very first Bigfoot tracks, supposedly where the term Bigfoot came from, in Bluff Creek, California. Ray Wallace was rubbed elbows with Roger Patterson prior to the Patterson-Gimlin film being taken in 1967. Ray Wallace died in 2000, I think, and after Ray died, his children revealed that Ray was actually the inventor of Bigfoot. That Ray carved these tracks and pranked the Pacific Northwest from Northern California to Washington from the 50s to 70s or whatever. Rant Mullins pops up in this as a rival to Ray Wallace. Rant, in the early 80s, shortly before his death, came out in the news circuit as claiming that he actually made the first fake Bigfoot tracks and fake Bigfoot feet back in 1930 in the Gifford Pinchot area when he worked for the Forest Service. So he really challenged Ray Wallace's claims. There's also this huge feud between the two men in the small town of Toledo, Washington, which is really fascinating. Where I come into this story is at some point late last year, Jason Matson, who is my co-organizer of the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party and director of the museum there, Jason received these 3 homemade interview cassettes from Rant Mullins before he died. And, of course, Jason Rant and knew that he was involved in Bigfoot hoaxing somehow. So Jason contacts me, and I'm over the moon thrilled. Like, oh my God, there's actually like taped recordings of Rant telling his story, So Tyler and I have been going through the tapes, and we found the part where he talks about his so-called invention of Bigfoot back in 1930, and we've been transcribing it because Rant is actually like very difficult to understand. Very old man at the time of these recordings. If you know anything about Lewis County or like deep, especially with someone born in the not a lot of formal education, so there's a regional dialect that's pretty thick.
Yeah.
But that's a big project that I've been working on also, is just transcribing this testimony, this very rare, never before heard testimony from what we can tell is from the world's true first hoaxer of Bigfoot.
Yeah. And it is interesting whenever you talk about these little towns, Toledo back then would have been like a one-horse town. I mean, it's not, and it's not really all that much bigger now.
No.
Toledo.
They have 2 horses now.
Yeah, I think. And it's right next to a place called Vader, which I always liked, isn't it? Isn't Vader pretty close to there?
Vader, right.
And it's an interesting place that some of these places go. I've talked to you before about originally I kind of had a joke with you about having a county off at one point in time because Lewis County has these different locations and Snohomish County has these different types of things, and and I guess you and I live probably 70 miles apart, maybe or maybe 70, 90 miles, something like that. But what's interesting to me is that, the Art Bell howl was recorded in Snohomish, which is 7 miles away from here. And, Linda Moulton Howe talks about the Bigfoot coming out of a UFO reported by a ex-Snohomish County sheriff close to here, and those are the different types of things that is weird. And what I've found is that just like, and it's kind of an interesting thing if you know about Washington State history, just like Seattle sort of over-encompassed all the different locations around here because that's where the railhead ended instead of Tacoma or Everett or Port Townsend or whatever. You've got these weird towns that are sort of out in the middle of nowhere that were really populated for a large majority of time solely by men who were itinerant sort of timber workers and things like that. And so, a lot of times, I mean, my grandpa from Ohio came out here in the 1920s, and it was kind of I talked to him about it one time, and I never got to actually ask him if he'd ever seen a Sasquatch, but he would talk about just the sort of weird things like living in a stump and, working at a timber location where, like the plates were nailed to the table, and basically after they were all done, they would just come in with a big hose and just hose the place out. So these guys were really looking for fun, and if hoaxing elderberry pickers or whatever it is that these guys were doing, I mean, that would sort of break the boredom of what it was like to have these sort of really dangerous jobs that these guys were doing. And really we don't know. I mean, we live in a world of OSHA and safety and things like that now, where, towns like Tacoma and Everett had shingle mills and things like that. Some of these people would be operating machines with 1 or 2 fingers left because, the shingle saws would saw this stuff off. And so these guys were characters, and you know, it's sad to say that these guys have passed away, because that you know, there's a lot about history of this area that we don't really talk about in that way, because of the fact that you know, that's a bygone era for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, let me ask you this, Vince. If you how do you feel about that as him being a hoaxer? Do you think that it was one of those things where it was like, okay, well, the guy's not trying to create any kind of real drama. It's just kind of a, you know, he's just trying to have fun. It seems to me like at the notoriety point, it is interesting to me that, you know, like that the issue is not that I hoaxed. The issue was I hoaxed first, and you got famous for what I started. It's almost a weird thing.
Yeah, no, you're hitting the nail on the head there. When Rant Mullins decided to carve out these large footprints from alderwood that he had, the idea was merely to have some fun and scare the hell out of some huckleberry pickers, you know, that were somewhere in Gifford Pinchot. Nothing to do with wanting to perpetrate or create some legend. And that is evidenced by the fact that, you know, after the prank happened, he kind of just forgot about it and even lost track of the feat for a while. And it wasn't until Ray Wallace, you know, and I realize I'm kind of throwing the audience into the middle of a pretty big story here, but essentially Ray Wallace got a hold of the feat and got pretty famous in his own right by being connected with the Bigfoot world.
Yeah.
And Rant Mullins, you know, didn't get famous, and Rant Mullins never really liked Ray Wallace and thought he was kind of a jerk, and a lot of animosity brewed up, and it wasn't until the early 80s that Rant even revealed this story, which I found, which I'll be presenting actually at the Bigfoot Brews Tour in Bend, Oregon, the weekend after the Shayless Flying Saucer Party. I'll be presenting our year-long research project into the feud between Rant Mullins and Ray Wallace. But to give you a little spoiler on it, it has a lot to do with Rant Mullins really just being a angry, jealous man who was one of the have-nots, where Ray Wallace was one of the haves.
Yeah.
And ended up having a lot more success with this Bigfoot thing than Rant ever did. And, you know, it's kind of it's a very human story that coincidentally has a connection to Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well,
we've all been Ray Wallace and we've all been Rant Mullins.
Exactly. I think, yeah, and I think you're right. And it's small town Western Americana, that right there. That, I mean, you know, this is sort of, you can transfer this into cattle barons versus homesteaders, or Bigfoot hoaxer against another big. So did this ever come to blows in the street or anything like that, or was that, or is
never came to blows? But at one point, the Lewis County Sheriff did stop Rant Mullins and frisk him for a firearm because Ray Wallace was afraid that Rant was going to like shoot him in the bar.
Yeah.
Over Bigfoot, over fake Bigfoot. I mean, this is the greatest story ever told.
Yeah.
It's Kenneth Arnold.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also like why I love Lewis County so much.
Right.
Because, you know, like we've got the Kenneth Arnold story, the first flying saucers, and, you know, that alone should be enough to make like this one of the coolest little places in the country ever. But on top of that, we've got like this amazing small town soap opera going on, you know, about fake Bigfoot prints.
Yeah.
And that happens like just miles away from where the Kenneth Arnold thing happened. And that's just like two stories. There are so many more unique, beautiful things about Lewis County, Washington.
Yeah.
That has left me enamored. And a big part of that is me growing up by there. I bet if I grew up near Snohomish County, I would be doing something like this up there.
Oh, I know, and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding you about that. But it is interesting. But
Though.
but it is interesting that in a lot of ways that that we don't really realize how small the world is. And when you're talking about, say, for example, people getting a hold of Roger Patterson, not realizing that Roger Patterson really lives on the other side of the mountains, from there. A lot of people think Roger Patterson was this California guy that lived in Willow Creek. He didn't. He lived in Yakima, and so did Bob.
Yep.
Bob Gimlin still lives in Yakima, and so.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very interesting thing that we don't realize the connection to that. I didn't know that for forever. I remember growing up in Ireland and looking at the Paddy thing on In Search Of and thinking, oh yeah, that's real. I really think it's real. Okay, but the thing that's funny to me is that I lived around here for such a long time, and it wasn't like somebody said, "Oh, well, yeah, Bob Gimlin lives in Yakima," and I remember meeting him at a conference and thinking, "Oh, did you retire to Yakima? I mean, because you obviously lived in Bluff." I thought Buff Creek was a town. You know what I mean? It was,
Yeah.
but that was one of those things where if you don't know those different type of story, and isn't Ray Wallace in himself a guy who then created some sort of Bigfoot movies? Like he was chasing Bigfoot all over and goes to Alaska and supposedly sees Bigfoot in Alaska.
Well, so this is a huge part of the Ray Wallace mythology. Ray Wallace, I think you could easily say that he was one of the very last vestiges of the American tall tale culture.
Right.
Where he was almost like P.T. Barnum. He would spin these marvelous tales, about like how he would capture juvenile Sasquatches, and he would call up Peter Byrne or Renee DeHinden or John Green, and it would like offer them access to this juvenile Sasquatch for $1 million. And they'd say like, oh, well, why don't you just let me see it for $1,000? And then suddenly, oh, sorry, the Bigfoot escaped,
Yeah.
And he apparently made some actual movies, which there are a few still frames from out on the internet. Clearly an ape suit, like nothing of real evidence or weight. But after he died, the word got out that he actually dressed his wife Elna up in a gorilla suit and would film her walking on cornflakes or something, or frosted flakes to mimic the snow, like bizarre stuff like that. And I don't think he ever really took himself seriously. I think he just really enjoyed the fun of it.
Yeah.
Where I feel kind of a kinship with him.
Yeah.
Like I make videos where I dress people up as Bigfoot and do rap hip hop videos and stuff.
Yeah.
And Ray just really enjoyed having fun with this concept. And it wasn't just Bigfoot. Like he got into the flying saucer stuff too. He made a claim that the US government visited him to ask him about all the flying saucers that he had seen, and he told them that's actually where Bigfoot came from, and Bigfoot and the aliens were working together. Ray Wallace even ran a free zoo just outside of Vader, a number of exotic reindeer, and you could go there for free and pet them and feed them and everything. It was a very larger than life character who just had fun with everything he did.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. I was watching some weird show. I mean, somehow I fall asleep and Amazon Prime's on, and it just next thing you know, it's like just starts playing this movie, and there was some weird movie, and I thought Ray Wallace had shot that movie where it was like this person is chasing Bigfoot all over the place and ends up in Alaska, and then he finds out what it is.
You might be I think you're thinking of Ivan Marks.
Oh, was it Ivan Marks? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That might be it.
Ivan Marks did this whole documentary where he was lucky enough to film Bigfoot in several different spots in the Northwest and Alaska, and it's clearly just someone in a suit dancing around. Like it's really funny.
Yeah. Well, I think it is interesting that he does capture it 3 or 4 times, and
some guys have all the luck.
Well, that's it. That's it. But coming back to the show itself and the flying saucer thing. Now, is this 1 day? Is this 2 days? How many days is this? It's going to be 1 day.
Yeah, it's 1 day. Doors at City Farm open at 9 a.m. At 9:30, I am the first speaker, and I'm just welcoming everyone to the very first Chehalis Flying Saucer party. I'm talking a bit about the Kenneth Arnold story, a bit about Chehalis' interesting relationship with flying saucer culture, and then I am introducing local pilot John Rowe, who has some really bizarre eyewitness experiences himself. And, you know, what a perfect first guest to have for a celebration honoring Kenneth Arnold than another pilot
right.
who's seen things.
Yeah.
You know, and then from there, the party just kicks off. We're having speakers throughout the entire day, the movies, the bands, the museum exhibits, the kids area, the saucer drop. Yeah.
Well,
and then it goes till probably about midnight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and it sounds like if you're going to go and you're an adult, you'd probably want to get a room somewhere in Chehalis or something like that. That's a location that you could. There now, is there a haunted location that's not involved in this? But is there a haunted hotel in Chehalis as well, or am I thinking of another town? Is it the Olympic Club or
the Olympic Club, which is in Centralia?
Oh, Centralia.
Yeah, but I mean, the towns bleed into each other. You can barely tell them apart when you're driving through. McMenamin's Olympic Club in downtown Centralia. They're actually a sponsor of the Flying Saucer Party, and that's a great place to get a room. You know, if you are coming from out of town, time that night, you don't want to drive home, you know, later. Definitely check out the Olympic Club. Lots of very historic stories to that place, as most McMenamin's properties have. Yeah, and you know, just plenty of paranormal ghost stories too that occur there.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's interesting about McMenamin's is, and my son works at a McMenamin's. It seems like it's almost part of the idea is buy something that's haunted or get something that's
right.
and then go from there, because they do sponsor a lot of different things. McMenamin's UFO Festival, and then in McMinnville, and all these different places. I'm really glad that they have sponsored you guys as well. To do that.
I do also want to mention that the Holiday Inn Express in Centralia is also a great sponsor of us. I don't know how haunted it is, but maybe you want to stay somewhere that's not haunted, so you can.
Well, yeah. Oh, and to be honest with you, if I'm going to stay someplace, it's probably going to be at the Holiday Inn Express. So you maybe at 2 or 3 in the morning, you can hear an Irish guy. Because by then I will have the full Irish accent going on, because I'll probably have had a few, and I'll be roaming up and down the hallways and things like that.
And that's for free.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, in other words, don't be upset. That's part of the whole experience. Is
part
here
of the entire experience,
yeah. But no, I think that's an excellent point. Is to always thank the people who are your sponsors for this, and the vendors that are coming, and the speakers that are coming. And it sounds like So the first speaker that you've got is you. Then you're going to be talking about that. Then you've got a pilot who's going to talk about some strange phenomena that he's experienced, which is pretty cool. And I can tell you myself. And if Sam's listening, my wife, if you want to tell your story about the strange stuff you've seen in the skies around that area, call in. But if you don't, that's fine too. But the thing that I found about it is that there's a lot of different strange phenomenon that happens that is reported around there. Not necessarily just sort of nuts and bolts type thing, but all kinds of plasma balls and whether ball lightning exists or not. I guess they haven't really proved whether ball lightning is real or not. But these sort of plasma balls that kind of go around, and I have no idea what they are. But you can. But these are things that happen in this sort of weird sort of geology that's going on down around that area where you guys live. Now, is that your fiance is a sensitive woman, right? In the classic sense, I'm saying that in a sensitive to energy and everything like that. When she moved there with you, did she start to feel like there was a shift in energy or a vortex or something like that? I know this is not necessarily your different way of doing it, but is that something that I know she does some sort of different types of dowsing? Is that something that she experiences, or is that something that she has sort of not delved into yet?
Well, I definitely don't want to put words into her mouth, but I can definitely say that she is well aware and cognizant of how different and strange this area is compared to Seattle, where she moved from.
Right.
But a lot of that, I'm sure, has everything to do with living right in the middle of a downtown urban or city metropolis, and then moving to the sticks where you can hear see chickens walk across the road, which is where we live, So there's definitely that. But yeah, no, she has certainly noticed a peculiar character to this region, this area.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, because it does seem to go into these different types of things, and when you talk about the melding of Sasquatch and UFO, which I know a lot of people hate to bring that up, right? That a lot of people hate it, and they say that. Well, but, and I'm not saying that I'm saying it's the same thing. I've made the analogy over the years that, you can go to a savanna in Africa and go to an oasis or a lake, and you can see a lion and a giraffe drinking out of the same lake. It doesn't mean they're related. It just means that they like to go around the same. Sometimes there are phenomena that stays around the same thing, and and that's what I'm saying is I'm not saying that Bigfoots come out of UFOs, and I'm not saying that they have all these different types of things, but it seems like in some ways that a lot of people report that phenomena in a similar location to other things, which is kind of an interesting thing because I don't think we really normally take the world of the paranormal, which if Bigfoot is a flesh and blood creature, then you're not, you don't want to talk about that being, it's not paranormal. It's just normal that nobody's found yet. But I understand that. But what I'm trying to get at is that these things are not tracked in any sort of way that you can sort of look at that data together and say, what is it? You know, what are the similarities between these different types of things? Because I've had people tell me, yeah, this Bigfoot is going to disappear and it's going to do these different types of things. And I've seen something disappear. It doesn't mean it was a Bigfoot. That's their interpretation of what it is. All I can say is I saw something and it was no longer there. Whether that was a Bigfoot to begin with, that's your deal to prove. It's not my deal to prove. You know.
We put a lot of ourselves
Yeah.
into interpretations
Yeah.
of things we understand.
But do you feel that way? You know, it's kind of an interesting thing where the government, whenever it wants to keep a secret, and I don't know if you're into conspiracy theories or not, but whenever it wants to keep a secret, it compartmentalizes everybody. Okay, so it says you work on this bit, somebody else is going to work on this bit, you work on this bit, you never the twain shall meet. In the paranormal, we do that to ourselves. We do not talk to other. I mean, Bigfooters are Bigfooters, and UFO people are UFO people, and ghost hunters are ghost hunters, and you don't share data, and you don't talk to anybody about it, and so that it seems like to me to draw any so you're one of the rare people that I talk to that actually has some kind of a general knowledge, and I think you are what's called a polymath. You know, you know something about. I mean, I could start a conversation with you. We can carry it on about anything. You know what I mean? You can carry on a conversation with somebody about some topic, and you know how to do it, and you draw correlations and say this is possibly what it could be, possibly what it isn't, or what have you, and maybe we're not going to agree on those different types of things, and that's fine too. But do you find that that's part of the issue whenever you're dealing with this, is that we try not to sort of muddy the waters? Do you think that muddies the waters whenever we're talking about these things in the same vein or the same program?
Well, I think it muddies the waters to a person who doesn't really want to challenge themselves onto, to really accurately learn the truth about what they're experiencing. You're right. There's definitely a lot of people who, stick to their own little tribes.
Right.
And, thank you. They stick to their own tribes. They UFO people probably don't really want to consider the fact that maybe Sasquatches are skydiving out of flying saucers, and vice versa. Bigfooters don't want their serious cryptozoological scientific research being muddied or sullied by New Age concepts that Bigfoot can cloak, or Bigfoot can telepathically tell you that you need to recycle more.
Yeah,
and it all gets to a fault sometimes. Like maybe we could get a better understanding of these if we kind of realize that they're really not so disparate. That maybe they do bleed into each other, and why wouldn't they? Because it's we don't know what these things are,
right?
Whether it be ghosts, whether it be psychic phenomena, whether it be UFOs, whether it be alien abduction, whether it be past life regression, or Sasquatch, or cryptids, or skinwalkers, we have no idea what these things are. We are applying our own cultural selves into our interpretation of these indescribable and bizarre phenomena.
Right.
So it's really interesting in the way that we taxonomize and segregate these topics.
Yeah.
Within themselves, And so, I see exactly what you're saying. I don't have much of an answer in terms of what I think would be best for these fields, really, though.
Yeah.
Because they're so bizarre. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it is one of those things where I think that in a lot of ways, we have to. There's a genuine thing that I think, if anybody's interested in my opinion, which is tell the truth. I mean, just tell the truth. And I think that's the genuine thing that I tell people. It's whether don't try to hoax people who are serious into cryptozoology or whatever, and that's fine. Don't try to do that. I mean, don't try to hoax Dr. Meldrum. Don't try to hoax Cliff from finding Bigfoot or whatever. That's what it is. However, I do also think that if you told them the truth and they genuinely thought that you were being absolutely 100% genuine about it, they wouldn't sort of dismiss you. It's the fact that there are some people who have turned this into and that's going back to our original point, as a way to become better than someone else, that causes the issue. In other words, I believe in telepathy. I think and I'm not saying that telepathy is coming from a Bigfoot. I just believe in the concept of telepathy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but on the other hand, too, I don't know how people say to me, okay, I'm getting this message from Bigfoot, and this is what they said. You can't dispute that. You can't disprove that. You can't say anything. Oh, the only thing you can ever do at that point in time is to say, you've told this story and it told you to do this, and now it's telling you to do that. That's the only thing is, why did the story change or whatever? But,
right.
But the hard part about it is and as a person who, and you've done this before, as a person who's made documentaries on all kinds of different Bigfooters, that you have to basically try to provide them with a voice, because it may be that they're actually telling you the truth, and there is no way of knowing whether they're telling you the truth except in the long scheme of things, right? And so, but it's an interesting thing to me, because a lot of people have associated me with a certain Bigfooter that says they get talked to, and all these different types of things. And I've always asked these people, well, has Bigfoot ever told you anything that has gone against your core value? Your core values. And the answer is always no, which is interesting, And wouldn't you think that now, to me, I look at this as a sort of I'm of two minds. I think that it could be flesh and blood, and I think it could be something else, right? I'm not going to put it in one box. But if it is some sort of Neolithic creature that has been without society for forever and a day, it's not going to believe in the types of things that we believe in. I mean, it's not going to believe in currency or getting paid or, all these different types of things. And so it would seem to me like if you are some capitalist, that, it would say, yeah, maybe you should, maybe you should live like there's no concept of ownership, which basically maybe we do, and maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it's not. It works in societies where there's very, very few people who live in an area. But that's always interesting to me, Vince, is that from that standpoint, I don't know the answer to that, but it would seem to me that it seems to me like we don't know, and people who have muddied the water with the data we can't really see the forest for the trees, and it's one of those things where, man, I don't know. I just don't know. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know either, but I am pretty sure that I know a few things. Number one, some people are liars.
Yeah,
Number two, some people have genuinely experienced confusing things and they don't know what to make of it. And number three, some people I think are combinations of the both,
yeah,
where maybe they've run into something weird in the woods. They don't know what to do with it, but then they get an idea. Oh, okay, what I can make some money out of this, or I can gain notoriety. I can gain followers. I often say this almost as a joke, but more and more it's seeming true that starting your own, paranormal ghost investigation group or UFO society or Bigfoot hunting group is like the new starting your own garage band.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's almost a way to get chicks. It's a way to like
Well,
like fun at parties and stuff. And
yeah,
I find it interesting that sometimes you have these mouthpieces for altruistic, wise entities who somehow convince the followers to give the mouthpieces money.
yeah,
And it's not just with Bigfoot; it's with the UFO phenomena too. It's with Jay-Z Knight and Ramtha.
yeah,
You got like this 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior spirit who wants you to give money to some woman in Yemen.
yeah. And let me ask you a question about that, because
Mm-hmm.
we if you live in Washington, we all know about Jay-Z Knight, and Jay-Z Knight is not the only quote unquote cult that's around here. I mean, there's one that lives up the road, not far from me. They just are not famous, and but are you welcome in Yelm after doing a report? I mean, that's an honest question, because I would imagine that, from some of the things that I know, again, Yelm is this weird little town. Not weird, but it's a town on the edge of on the fringe. It's on the fringe of civilization, and it seems like to me like that if you were to alienate Jay-Z Knight, that you wouldn't necessarily be that welcome in town.
Okay, so Jay-Z Knight, just for anyone who doesn't know, is a woman who lives in Yelm, and since 1977, she has claimed to channel this entity named Ramtha. Ramtha is this male figure who lived 35,000 years ago on the lost continent of Lemuria, which is essentially kind of a New Age theosophical Pacific Ocean version of Atlantis that came into preponderance in the early 20th century amongst like early pioneers of the New Age movement. And Jay-Z Knight, via Ramtha, runs this School of Enlightenment in Yelm, Washington. And a lot of people call it a cult. There's a lot of weird things that go on there. A lot of money goes through it. Jay-Z Knight is very wealthy and charges a lot for the teachings of Ramtha. You go there and you learn this esoteric knowledge. You do blindfolded archery, fun, cool stuff like that. Of course, it's Pacific North weird as hell. So, of course, we did an episode about it some years ago and just had a lot of fun with it because it's really funny. And, to answer your question, I received a few bits of hate mail from it. I received, at one point, someone put a curse on Pacific North Weird, where we would be like scalped by like Native American ghosts at night. It hasn't happened yet.
Oh, okay.
But surprisingly, I mean, or maybe not so surprisingly, I'm totally welcome in Yelm. I actually even like frequently visit Jay-Z Knight's gift store, Jay-Z Rose in Yelm, which is one of the most amazing, weirdest stores you've ever been in. And I'm sure plenty of people walk by me and know me as the guy that made a funny video on YouTube about Jay-Z Knight, but like, life in any way. There's actually, though, like one funny story that occurred from it. I was at the first annual Yelm UFO Festival, which occurred 2 years in Yelm. It is now the Earth UFO Festival, which now takes place in Lacey, Washington.
Oh.
But I was at the first one in Yelm, and there was this singer from Latin America named Giovanna Starlight, and great soprano singer. She was like singing bits of the Lion King soundtrack, and like a traditional Southern American folk music up on stage. But she's about maybe 4.5 feet tall, and she after the performance is walking around, and I got my camera, and I wasn't filming during this part, but like she walks up to me and says, "I know you." You made fun of Ramtha on the internet.
Yeah.
She makes a motion of a shotgun. But then she just laughs and just pats me on the back. Is like, I kid. You're funny, but I kill you one day.
Yeah.
But just a complete joke, I mean, but that is literally the only in-person moment I've ever had where like a devoted follower of Ramtha, or admirer at the least,
right,
saw me as like, oh, you're the person that had fun. And she was cool, so like I really as silly as the Ramtha thing gets, in my opinion, I do think there is a bit of a bit of an unfair notion about Ramtha followers that they're all so serious.
Yeah.
Well, most of them are just like pretty interesting, weird people, but who can also like take a joke.
Yeah, I my experiences with Ramtha followers, and I've known quite a few, to be honest with you, and it's always really interesting to me. They're genuinely nice people. And so and some of them are in different levels of being in belief. At a certain points in time, I think that's one of those things that as you go through that, and maybe that's one of the things that is interesting, is that I found that from that standpoint, I've done some different talks to groups of them, and they don't really have any issues with any of the things that I say. And, I always say, I'm not trying to, I always say this, that I'm not trying to offend anybody's religious perspectives or anything by anything that I say. But, but it is interesting that, maybe the essence of it is that, once you're in that group and then you try to leave, I suppose that's the same of every group. Nobody likes a quitter.
I certainly don't.
Yeah, and so I think
unless it's heroin.
Yeah, well, definitely, that's for sure. But and so, but it is it's a funny thing, and the Pacific Northwest does have a really weird sort of sense of having this sort of people that believe this. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh in Oregon, but basically bought a whole.
No, I don't remember, but I know who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those things that for a long time it was. We sort of had this idea of people who would just join any cult. This is it. Just whatever. Cult of the day comes by, we're all joining. We're all signing up for it. But but I think that one of the things that's interesting about it is because we do sort of fly our freak flag. I've noticed that because when I moved to America first, I moved to Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, and I couldn't imagine being a guy in Toledo talking about seeing a ghost or a fairy or Bigfoot or whatever. I mean, hats off to guys in Ohio that say that they've seen that kind of stuff.
Right.
But because in a lot of ways you're dealing with a middle America sort of mom and pop apple pie, kind of a group of people where we're not necessarily like that out here. Again, for various reasons, and I don't think a lot of that might be that because we did come from an itinerant group of males out here at first, and we were always looking for women and things like that, and maybe that's just one of those things where some of the buildings around here, you can't go to an old town and say that wasn't the old saloon and the old brothel or something like that. Or I mean, all these towns that we live in all had something like that, and so maybe from that standpoint in time because we have a lot of people coming from Pacific Islanders or Asia or whatever that come here, and this sort of amalgamation of native peoples and sort of Norse peoples and Pacific Islanders that we've just sort of had this kind of weird, I kind of get what you're saying, ghost relationship or spiritual earth elemental thing going on up here. I don't know how to explain it, but like I said, I've never really had anybody say, you believe you saw Bigfoot? You're nuts. More than anything, it's like, oh, that's cool. Where did you see it? Because I saw one there too, or whatever. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people I went to high school contact me now that I do this program and say, yeah, I was up there and I saw something, and it's just bizarre in the fact that they just want somebody to say it to, and it's not like they don't want any notoriety, and they don't want anything anything to do with it, but they just want to tell somebody that believes them, But I couldn't imagine.
It's not to make fun of them.
Yeah. But I can't. But in a lot of places, if you say that, then you get that. Oh, you're dealing with a demon, or you're dealing with this, or you're dealing with that kind of thing, and you're not. And I don't believe in demons, so that helps. But anyway. So,
Wow.
do you find that? Do you find that that when you're doing these different types of things that and different shows like that that we as an area or a group of people sort of have that sort of openness to it, or am I wrong on that? Is that something that do you ever get a situation where you deal with people who say, I just don't want to be on tape, or I don't want to do that? It seems to me like all the different things that you're doing with people are very, very open to sharing their stories with you. And go ahead.
I would say for the most part, for the vast majority of people that we speak to, they're already in a way within this community that is accustomed to speaking about this. They want to share their stories, as you said. The only times I ever really run into people who just don't want to be on camera, it never has anything to do with them not wanting to seem foolish or not wanting or not believing in this. It's usually like just our normal apprehensions that you find with people being on camera. People are just thinking, oh, like I'm too old. They're like, oh, I need to lose weight first, before I'm on camera. kind of just like silly, superficial things like that. I find, I would say easily 90% of the people I have spoken to are ready, willing, and eager to be on camera to share what happened to them or what they think or what they believe, about this. And that may have a lot to do with, I mean, it may be myopic on my part to a degree because, I'm walking around UFO festivals with the camera looking for the stuff. I'm not walking through Amazon headquarters, asking people about, do you want to be on a Bigfoot show? So
Yeah.
we in the Northwest, we get to select our own tribes to a degree, and that's the cool thing about it is because it's if you believe in weird stuff or esoteric topics, it's really, really easy for you to find your own people.
Yeah. I think you're right. I've found that to be very, very interesting, and there seems to be some weird museum for something on every corner.
Yeah. Oh, okay. In terms of museum, I got to share this quick. Lately, I've become enamored with the Westport Winery in Washington. Westport, Washington is this spooky little sea town. You have to go through Aberdeen, Kirklebain. You have to go through that to get to it. But there's a winery on the way there, and they have like the coolest art maze you could ever imagine. You can get a glass of wine and just walk through like these weird sculptures. There's Bigfoot stuff. There's Easter Island replicas. But they just released this news story that the owners of the Westport Winery want to make not only the Northwest's first, but the world's first mermaid museum, which
Wow.
I am super, super excited about. And I'm actually intending to, once the whole flying saucer party and Rant Mullins presentation September kerfuffle calms down, I'm going to take my fiancée, Sabrina, to a nice little weekend on the ocean, and I intend to stop by the Westport Winery and offer my services to be the documentarian of the creation of this world's first mermaid museum.
Okay, well,
So,
which
first.
which brings me to a point, right, where we got to take our break. But so when we come back, I want to re-go over a couple of different things about the Flying Saucer Party itself. Again, you can see it at flyingsaucerparty.org or find it on Facebook. But I also want to talk to you about a project. You're a man of a million projects, and I think that you were creating a book on cryptids. Okay, you were still doing that. I want to talk to you about maybe how that's going. And also, I know you were looking for strange cryptids that people could submit to you from their area, maybe. I don't know if you're still doing that.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Okay. So what I'm going to do this time is actually play this for the full 7 minutes and not cut it off halfway through because I was being stupid. And I'll see you back. I'll see you back on the other side.
Luckily, my fiance Sabrina and my friend Tyler were watching us outside, and they saw like, "Oh my God, you should be back on." I'm like, "That's only 5 minutes."
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, as people figure out as they watch this show even more, I could probably just talk for 3 hours by myself, but that would be boring. And you are counterpoint type of a guy, and I really enjoy talking to you, Vince. And so we'll be back right after these breaks. You are listening to On the Other Hand with Kevin Beegle on the We Are Paradox Media Network. You can find the show on Facebook at We Are Paradox Media. Also, you can hear the show on Spreaker Radio by searching We Are Paradox Media. The show will be returning shortly. We have taken a break for station affiliation. This is a live show, and the call-in number is 360-548-7070. Huh? I want you to call later. I want you to call. You are listening to On the Other Hand with Kevin Beegle on the We Are Paradox Media Network.
Hey, Kevin.
You can find the show on Facebook at We Are Paradox Media.
Let's see.
Also, you can hear the show on
Can you hear me,
Spreaker
Vince?
Radio by searching We
Yes,
Are Paradox
I have
Media.
Tyler Bounds with me right now.
The show will be returning
Oh, does he want to talk?
shortly. We have taken
Yeah,
a
he
break
does.
for station affiliation.
Okay, sounds good.
This is a live
Cool.
show, and the call-in number is 360-548-7070.
Are you able to see both of us?
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Tyler is also participating in the Flying Saucer Party.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. I'm going to be doing manning a tinfoil hat
And helping out with the saucer drop.
Yes.
Okay, guys, we're back. We're back with now. You added somebody here.
I did.
He went out and got his own helper, Tyler Bounds, and
It just, your questions are just like too tough for me, so I needed some backup.
well, Tyler's an interesting guy. It's so now if you don't know who Tyler is, and maybe Tyler could tell us who he is and what and how he brings a little bit to the I know and he knows a lot about Bigfoot. Let's just put it that way. Kind of has been around the world talking about Bigfoot and experiencing lots of different Bigfoot stuff. But Tyler, give us a few moments. You got as long as you want to tell us who you are and what you're doing with Vince.
Okay, yeah. My name is Tyler Bounds, and I've been into Bigfoot as long as I can remember. 4 or 5 years old, I had an experience out in the woods with my grandfather that extrapolated into me becoming an investigator and researcher with the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. And I have organized and facilitated and scouted out BFRO expeditions in the Pacific Northwest and around the country. And I've been pretty hardcore into Bigfoot for this is like the last 11 or 12 years. I was lucky enough to fall into a position as a production crew member on a television show on Animal Planet called Finding Bigfoot. And so I was a scout, outdoor technician, camera operator, associate producer, that sort of thing on the TV show for about 5 years. And I traveled all over the United States of America, going to famous Bigfoot locations. I mean, kayaking through Boggy Creek. I've checked a lot of things off of the Bigfoot bucket list, and I've interviewed hundreds, maybe thousands of Bigfoot witnesses. It's the last 10, 12 years of my life have kind of been there, done that in the Bigfoot world. So I know quite a bit. I've talked to a lot of people, been a lot of places, and it was a great experience being part of that. And growing up being interested in Bigfoot, and then getting a job looking for Bigfoot. You know, I'm one of the few people that actually had a paycheck for looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, for sure.
It was
Now,
cool. It was super cool.
yeah, and if I'm remembering this right, and don't get mad at me if I do this wrong, because my memory is not what it used to be, but I do try to listen to a lot of different shows about with you guys on it. Anything Vince is on, I usually watch. But were you the guy who lived in Bellingham and saw Bigfoot? It had something to do with Bellingham? Was that you, or is that somebody else?
I have never. Well, no, I did live in Bellingham for a little while when I was going to college up there.
Oh, okay.
But there's some other guys. There's some other Bigfoot guys. I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head right now, but I do have. I have knowledge of Bellingham. I do have some funky Bellingham stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regarding it. No, I'm not sure if what you're trying to remember.
Oh, okay. It was one of those things where I thought somebody was living in Bellingham and they saw Bigfoot looking through their window, and it was really high up and whatever. I didn't know if that was the first time that you'd seen a Bigfoot with your grandpa, and then.
Yeah, no, that was in Northern California, actually, when I was quite young. But that wasn't in Bellingham, but I did have kind of a strange connection to something that happened in Bellingham when I was quite young. Can I tell the story?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can. Yeah, go ahead.
So, one of my earliest memories was when I was 4 or 5 years old, we had a dog, and she was pregnant, and I woke up one night and I heard all this weird noise, and I started crying like, "Mom, Dad!" And our dog had decided to have its puppies on my bed.
Oh, wow.
And they came in and turned on the lights, and there's all these little mewling puppies. I'm like, "Oh," and it was weird. And but those puppies, we gave them away, and gave them to friends and family, and they all found homes. But we did give one of the puppies to a couple that we knew that lived in Bellingham, and years and years later, there was a Bigfoot report a burglar report on the shores of Lake Sammamish,
right,
in Bellingham, and the Whatcom County Sheriff came around at the corner of a house looking for a prowler, and came face to face with a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That had a dog under its arm.
Wow.
And the Bigfoot went one direction, and the police officer went the other direction.
Yeah.
And later on, my friends, they're my godparents. Now that I think about it, Tom and Paula. The puppy the puppy we gave them grew up into a dog, but after that sighting, their dog had gone missing.
Oh, wow.
So there's a possibility that a dog that was born on my bed was actually abducted and possibly eaten by a Bigfoot.
Or kept as a pet.
And raised it of their own.
And petted and loved for
the
rest of his life.
Yeah.
And I will love you, and I will pet you, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
well,
Yeah, so that is a Bigfoot connection that I have. I may have actually told that story on a podcast or somewhere at some point in time, but
yeah,
that's a Bellingham Bigfoot personal connection that I do have. So
yeah.
if you remember that correctly, good on you. If not, then you're thinking of someone else. But
Well,
I'll throw that as an aside.
you know what I'm going to say. Of course, I remember that story. I remember that. It's exactly the way I remembered it. You couldn't have said it any better. But the thing that and Whatcom County's funny. Whatcom County is a Bigfoot free Bigfoot refuge area, just like Skamania County is a no kill area. And
Exactly.
so that's one of those things that is interesting, and that's like I said, yeah. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Where are you? Are you in Snohomish County? I heard
Yeah.
you saying something
I'm
earlier.
I'm in wonderful downtown Marysville, Washington at present, and I live right close to the Tulalip Reservation. I taught on the reservation over there, and and I go out to Granite Falls, Washington, on the Mountain Loop Highway, and that's where I've had interesting things happen. Let's put it that way. And maybe Vince will come one day. I don't know why I have to try to pull Vince to Snohomish County. I'm trying to big it up. I'm trying to big up Snohomish County, but
well, you can't. I grew up in Arlington, so just north of you. So I grew up in the Cascade Foothills. Everything from Highway 2 to Highway 20 was my stomping grounds, Mountain Loop Highway. I've investigated a lot of reports. I mean, that was on the BFRO website. I would take all the reports from Snohomish County, or most of the reports, because I'm intimate with that area. I know Marysville, Arlington, Granite Falls, Snohomish. I used to live in Sultan. So I'm extremely familiar with that area and the Cascades. East of there. I much know every trail, every lake.
Yeah.
Been there, done that once again.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right up in my hometown area.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because everybody says to me, well, if I'm coming to your area, where should I go look for Bigfoot? And I always just say, come north on Highway 9 and then take a right.
There you go.
Because that's where it would be. And it's funny because Sultan, when I was 17 years old, that's where I had my very first what I think was a Bigfoot encounter. I can't guarantee that, but
Around Sultan?
Yeah, Sultan Basin Road.
Oh, Sultan Basin Road.
Yeah.
There's some. I have. I've got stories up there. You get up there in Spada Lake area.
Yeah.
And there's. I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, I can go on and on about sightings and reports that I've taken, investigated, and it's funny how you can connect dots. Like, there's a sighting on Sultan Basin Road.
Yeah.
And then there's one on Highway 2.
Yeah.
And then there's one, and it's like you can connect the dots, and they're all chronologically pretty close to each other, and it could be the same individual that different people are seeing.
Yeah. For sure. And if
For sure.
And if you're out in that area because you just want to go, by Index, Washington is the Espresso Chalet, and that's where they filmed Harry and the Henderson, and they have now it's like a 28-foot tall Harry sculpture, and it's awesome. I mean, that's all I'm going to say about that. It's cool.
It is. It's cool.
So. And Tyler's now he's helping you at the Flying Saucer Fest or saucer party. I don't know
A
why I want to.
party.
I don't want to. I don't know why I want to call everything a fest. And it's
Well, so that's an important thing to bring up. We specifically are not calling this a UFO festival because a UFO festival is what you're accustomed to going to.
right.
This is
This is
something.
It's a party. We're celebrating. It's a celebration.
Mhm,
It's
yeah,
it's a party, or it could be a political movement as well.
the flying saucer party. Yes.
And we might 2024, we could be.
Heck with that, 2020. Flying
I'll
saucer.
I'll vote. I'll vote for you. I don't care at this point in time.
Take it back, White Sands.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, go first twice.
Yeah.
That'd be.
Reasonable policies for reasonable people. That's what I think your slogan should be. So that's.
Yeah, so I mean, the Flying Saucer Party. It's not a UFO festival.
Yeah.
It's a celebration. It's a good time. You can do whatever you want there. And yeah, Tyler's one of my travel partners and creative individuals, friends that I do a lot of things with. We are doing the Rat Mullins project together, and I, of course, had to bring him into the Flying Saucer Party.
Yeah.
And he's always like a really great creative foil and collaborator for all of these things.
Yeah, he's kind of your straight man, Vince. Or I don't know if you're his or the other way around. Is that what?
He's more the Sonny to my Cher.
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
way.
the slave to his Chuck D.
Yeah. Okay, that's a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
For
Or
sure.
Vice versa. We swap. We share.
Yeah, and if you don't know who Public Enemy is, just turn this off right now. We
Exactly.
that.
If you don't know who Public Enemy is, then you definitely fear a black planet.
well,
Exactly.
you definitely.
911 is a joke. 911, right? There we
Yeah.
go. There you have it.
Especially when it's the Bigfoot sightings. Don't call 911 when they're not going to do anything.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a 9/11 joke, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But we can go into the conspiracies next time. But
Right. Flav did it. Flava Flav brought down the Twin Towers, I'm pretty sure.
yeah. Well, he's an interesting cat, Flava Flav, and
And he's got more interesting as the years have gone on.
that's for sure.
Or-
He's definitely become more of a character of himself. That's
Yep.
yeah. But I remember my first wife loved Flava of Love, so I've had a lot of Flava Flav over the years.
There you go.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Tyler, that you're here because I found very interesting when I was watching the video of you guys was this Bigfoot trap. Now, is that that you guys went and visited this Bigfoot trap? Do you think that actually that's what it was, or was it purpose built for that, or is that sort of something that somebody sometimes they see something and they say, oh, that's a Bigfoot trap?
No, it was purpose built to trap a Bigfoot. They built it. Somebody, I don't remember who. There's a history to it, but somebody built it, dragged it out there, and or maybe built it there. But it's a pretty substantial structure, actually, and it's all welded shut now, so no Bigfoots are going to get trapped, or
Kids.
kids and tourists and that sort of thing. But no, that is a real thing. And then I think it was the Forest Service took it over and kind of turned it into a thing. It was built in 1974 by the North American Wildlife Research Team.
Oh, wow. And is that in sort of southern Oregon, or is that
Southern Oregon,
It's
yeah.
in Southern Oregon.
Literally just across the border from California.
Oh,
That's
is
how
it?
we found when we were on our way back from the Willow Creek adventure. We took a very strange way to get back into Oregon and found the Bigfoot trap.
Wow.
Yeah. So purposefully, we took a detour to go to the Bigfoot trap, and then found ourselves in. Yeah, we went to the Bigfoot trap. Saw a family get. There was a log that was full of a yellow jacket nest.
Oh,
and,
no.
A family came up and with a bunch of kids and yay, Bigfoot trap! Pow 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 pow! And they're getting peppered and they ran away we took some wayward roads, went to the Bigfoot trap, drove through some marijuana fields, and found ourselves back in the real world.
Yeah, that area is, if you're not, and it's legal to grow it there, and and a lot of people don't realize that it's legal to grow.
It's not legal. They're being very blatant about it.
Yeah,
there were like, Vince, is that marijuana? That's wow, that's acres and acres.
Oh yeah, and it stinks. I mean,
it was yeah. Did we just run over a skunk? Or,
yeah,
we're in marijuana town.
Yeah, and so that yeah, a lot of people are making quite a lot of money off that down there in Southern Oregon. But it's interesting though that you guys did it. Now, for you, Tyler, have you ever seen anything you would classify as a UFO, or is that something that you haven't really?
Oh, no. I mean, actually, we were just talking about this earlier this evening. After I had a sighting when I was quite young, and then wanting to find out more about Bigfoot, when you go to your public library, which I had to do in the 1970s, early 80s, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have iPhones and that sort of thing. So if you want to get information and learn things, you have to go to a place called the library.
Yeah.
And read it's called books.
Yeah.
So Bigfoot books were in the same section as ghosts, lake monsters, paranormal, mysterious world, UFOs. So I gravitated towards all that weirdness, paranormal, Fortean, I would gobble all that stuff up. Frogs raining from the sky.
Yeah.
Weird, just the weird things. I mean, it appealed to me very much. And, but no, actually, there was one instance while I was out on the road filming Finding Bigfoot that we were driving. I think it was we were driving from Oklahoma to Louisiana to our next location, and instead of getting on a plane and unloading everything, getting on a plane and flying for an hour and unloading everything, whatever, we just convoyed from Oklahoma to Louisiana, and we were somewhere in northeast Texas. Stopped at a gas station, and we were gassing up all of our convoy, 5 or 6 cars plus a U-Haul and that sort of thing. But somebody was standing outside or out in the parking lot. I think they were smoking a cigarette, so they're standing off to the side and like, hey, everybody, look at this thing. And so we all go over, or not all of us, but several of us go over, and there was kind of a turnip-shaped thing, kind of a top, kind of a egg-shaped, turnip egg type kind of a turnip shaped thing up in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
dark color, and it was just hanging up there. And we all looked at it for a while, and finally one of my producers said, "I know this isn't our this isn't our TV show, but
Right.
we should get some cameras. We have a bunch of cameras in the U-Haul, and we should go." And so we went and got some equipment, went out to the park, got a view of it. We're setting up all of our sticks, tripods and cameras and whatnot. And pretty much as soon as we're like ready to go and putting the batteries in and that sort of thing, this object just went zoom.
Yeah.
Straight up into the sky, gone forever. And we're like, okay, well, that's a wrap. Let's go, and let's keep on keeping on to Louisiana to go check out this. So, I've had a couple visuals. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, when I was down by Mount St. Helens, filming some stuff for our Rant Mullins project. Actually,
Right.
getting some beautiful of the rivers and the creeks and the mountains that they talk about, because, in the audiovisual world, if you talk about something, you want to have a picture of it.
Right.
You mention something, you have a visual of that. So I was going to the actual creeks and the rivers and the streams and the areas that Rant Mullins talks about in his dialogue. And there was also a meteor shower that weekend. So I found a great spot that was out and clear and kind of laid down and just staring at the sky and watching a bunch of meteors. And I saw a satellite. I'm like, oh, cool, satellite, because satellites are always cool to see. Then I saw another one. I'm like, wow, there's another satellite. And then there was another satellite. And I noticed that they were in a perfect triangle.
Right.
Isosceles triangle. Like even on three sides. And
Equilateral.
and equilateral triangle. There you have it. Yeah, I failed geometry. And but and instead of all these satellites kind of converging on each other or crossing paths or something, they all stayed in the same geometric pattern as they went across the sky. And I'm like, wow, that's really kind of weird. And were each of those satellites just of some craft or something that I was seeing, but I could still see stars behind it? Was it cloaked? Was it transparent? I have no idea, but it was one of those stranger things I've seen in the sky. And actually, I just told Vince about it this evening because we were talking about UFOs. I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, saw something really weird in the sky. And as far as I could see it, it crossed above us and kept on keeping on in the same configuration, which was strange because usually if it's a satellite, they're going to keep, go in different directions, but it stayed in kind of this triangular formation, and it struck me as weird. It struck me as, I've sat down and gazed at the stars many, many times, seen a lot of satellites, and but that struck me as unusual that they would stay in that same configuration for as long as I saw them tracking across the sky.
Right.
So,
right. I think you're exactly right. So let me ask you this, because I think you're on record, and I ask this to everybody, so don't take it the wrong way, because I asked this to. I mean, everybody probably knows who Richter Riolo is. I know who that is. He's like, doesn't believe in woo woo, type thing. But when it comes to UFOs, he would believe that, right? That they could cloak or something like that. but in Bigfoot, he says, no, you can't. That's not what it is. So you're not opposed to the idea that something material can go invisible.
Well, we already know that certain technological things can cloak. I mean, the military has already come out with really like advanced camouflage like gear that essentially you're looking at a fabric full of little sensors and cameras, where you're essentially wearing the Harry Potter invisibility cloak.
Right.
So I think what Richter's talking about there has more to do with the fact that it makes way more sense that technology could cloak rather than a physical animal.
Yeah. No. I completely agree with you. I agree with you.
Also, the next time you interview Richter, be sure to start in Bigfoot and who was the person that introduced him to the Bigfoot world.
Was it you, Tyler?
If he does not, he's full of shit. So it was totally me. He sent me a drawing. He made a caricature of finding Bigfoot that I found on what's the there's a what's the website? It's something like Unreal Art or Subversive Art or something like that. And I found it, and I put that on Facebook, and then he thanked me. Because at that point in time he was just a bartender at the Hard Rock Cafe in Las Vegas, and I promoted it, and then he drew some more, and he and I started a relationship or online relationship. Let me rephrase that.
You want to be careful.
Actually, I gave Richter his first promotion.
Yeah,
so,
he's told me that story.
Welcome, Richter.
He's told me that story in the past, Tyler. Just so you know, he has told me that.
I just want to Rick. I love Richter to death. I love Richter. I've met him. We've hung out and made out, and it was totally cool.
Yeah. Well, you missed it at the last Sasquatch one where Vince and I were there, and
I was sick that I came down with something I can't remember. I think I came down with Richteritis or something.
A case of the Richters. Yeah. So you're going to be running the saucer drop at the. Is that right?
Let me catch everyone up on what the saucer drop is.
Yes.
So this is actually something really cool that through our research into the Chehalis cultural connections that with flying saucers that have happened, since the Kenneth Arnold incident, we found out that for a while there was this event called Crazy Days in downtown Chehalis. The event still happens today, but it's now called Chehalis Fest. But back when it was called Crazy Days in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they would do this thing called the saucer drop. And during the saucer drop, the fire department would close off the street and raise up its snorkel truck, and they would throw flying saucers out at like crowds of children and people who would catch them, and at the bottom of each saucer was a discount to some local business. And I thought that was like when I found that in like a newspaper doing this research, I thought that was like the coolest thing I'd ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't we resurrect this for the Chehalis Flying Saucer Party? So like that's gonna happen at 12:15 p.m. It's going to be outside of the Lewis County Historical Museum from the McKinley Stump, not quite as high as a snorkel truck can get, but we made a bunch of little tiny Chehalis Flying Saucer Party frisbees, and we're having little discounts from local retailers at the bottom of them, and we're going to toss them out. And what's really cool about this is that the person who's going to throw out the first saucer is Chanel Shams, who is the granddaughter of Kenneth Arnold, who is driving here from Boise, Idaho.
Oh, wow.
She wants to be a speaker at the event, but she's also commemorating the saucer drop or the revival of the saucer drop by being the first saucer thrower.
Right.
It's like opening up a baseball game.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
So that, yeah.
And Tyler's going to be one of the people doing that. He's going to be dressed up as a extraterrestrial Uncle Sam type figure.
Okay. And so, and how no, I think that's awesome, but because my mind works in a funny way, Tyler. So you got to let me.
Oh no! I like how you just nonchalant, like, oh, he's going to dress up as Uncle Sam, extraterrestrial Uncle Sam, and throw. Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people would say maybe
I commend you.
Uncle Sam is an extraterrestrial.
Oh yeah.
There.
He wants to probe.
Yeah, but what I want to ask is, now you said that you were having a costume party for this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that going to be one of those things where you have to register your costume, or is it one of those things that's going to happen during the day, or is that more like, okay, come to the party, come to the pubs afterwards, watch the shows, and then we're going to pick it, or how are they going to pick that?
The costume contest, the alien costume contest, is
Right.
going to be the last official event party, and that's going to take place at McFiler's right after the band Tinkham Road plays at 7 p.m. So Tinkham Road will play from 7 p.m. to roughly 8. Right after that, anyone who wants to show up with a costume that's like somewhat alien or science fiction related is welcome to enter the there will be a panel of judges, and we will judge you.
we will judge you. That's good. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm
judging everyone, anyways.
You already do.
And so your speakers are going to be you, then the pilot that you mentioned before, and then you've got another.
Yeah.
If you could just go through the list.
I'll through it. So the day opens up at 9:30 a.m. I begin speaking.
Right.
Then I introduce the pilot, John Rowe. We speak until 10:30. At 11 a.m., alien abduction hypnotherapist Howard Beatty speaks. That guy is really awesome. He speaks until noon. At 12:15, we have two events happening in the town. We have the flying saucer drop, and if you want to stick around at City Farm, author John Schneider will be there reading excerpts from his book about Roswell. And then 1 p.m., Scott Schaefer comes to talk about the Maury Island incident and show his film.
Right.
Then at 2:30, Chanel Shams, the granddaughter of Kenneth Arnold, will be speaking about her memories of her grandfather and sharing some never-before-seen documents pertaining to Kenneth Arnold. Then at 4 p.m., James Clarkson, a.k.a. the UFO detective, will speak. He is doing a presentation called They Came Here First.
Yeah.
Which is all about, just the prominence of the Pacific Northwest and its influence on UFO popular culture and just how, like, everything that we know about UFOs all started here. And then that is followed by a speaker panel where all the speakers are up on stage, and you get to write down, as the audience, you get to write down questions that you'd like them to discuss up there. And I will be the MC for that, where I will be reading the questions to them.
Okay, and then you've got bands after that, and you've got 2 or 3 bands, is it?
We have 3 bands throughout the day. At 3 p.m. at McFiler's is the Chris Crow Project, and that's this cool psychedelic band. After that, at 5 p.m. is the Jacked Lords, which is like the greatest surf band to ever come out of Olympia or Washington, probably. And then at 7 p.m. is Tinkham Road, which is this wonderful Americana Northwest influenced band. They do songs about old logging disasters and railroad disasters from the Pacific Northwest. They do songs about Bigfoot. They've even written a song called The Summer of the Saucers, which is all about Kenneth Arnold and the Maury Island incident and all that. So
and if I may toss in there, that Tinkham Road is a road pass where I have investigated a few different Bigfoot reports. It's Tinkham Road is kind of a hot spot, actually. There's been a few sightings on Tinkham Road, and I've been up there and spent some time up in there. On that road exactly. And so when I saw Tinkham Road, I'm like, hey, did you know the Tinkham Road? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure he's aware of it because he's saying about it and UFOs. So yeah, not only is the band Tinkham Road, but any listeners, local listeners, who want to have a possible Bigfoot encounter or go somewhere to look around or listen, Tinkham Road is a great spot to do it. There's an old abandoned airstrip up there where you can kind of hang out and camp out, and it's a great spot. I recommend it to anyone who wants to possibly have a Bigfoot encounter. So,
yeah, well, that's awesome because I never heard of it, but like I said, it's one of those things where you get some holes in your ideas, and it's oftentimes whenever you're watching things like this that people will share it, these types of places, and that's what's cool about it is that a lot of people won't share this kind of stuff.
right.
So kudos to you guys. Now then you're saying that the Beef and Brew. Is it the Beef and Bigfoot brew and Bigfoot?
Big. There's no beef involved. I don't.
Okay.
Is there beef?
a lot of beefs and Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Well, there are. Yeah, maybe you guys can squash some beefs while you're there.
I'm a vegetarian, so hopefully it's not beef and brew. I'll miss out on half of it.
And so then you're doing. And when's that going? Where's that located at? Bend, Oregon.
That is in Bend, Oregon. It is starting at the Deschutes Brewery on the 28th, and that is the pre-funk party. And Tyler and I will be there along with Ken Gerhard of the what's he from?
Ken Gerhard. He's from Monsters, some TV show.
Yeah,
Alaska Monsters or something. Is that the Alaska Monsters guy?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, he's not Alaska Monsters. He's
the Fog Monster guy.
It's not fighting Bigfoot, so I don't care.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two. There's
someone else's show. What the hell?
There's
hold on. So that's the pre-party, and then on the 29th at the McMenamin St. Francis School is the official Bigfoot and Brews party, where Tyler and I will be talking. Ken Gerhard, the Olympic Project, Cliff from Finding Bigfoot. We're going to spend the whole day just doing presentations.
Shane Corson from Olympic Project will also be there.
Mark Marcel, and that's
Shelley
where
Covington, Montana.
Yes, that's where we're going to be presenting our Rant Mullins presentation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I like all those people that you're talking about. That's cool. I've met
good people, all good friends of mine.
Yeah,
mine.
Yes. Yeah, your guy, and then, well, and then let me see. There, I wanted to ask you one last thing. It's gone. It's gone out of my head. But anyway, and then you guys, and then Vince, then you are you guys planning on making it to the Sasquatch
Summit in Ocean Shores?
Yeah, in Ocean Shores, yeah. This year?
I sure am. Peter Byrne is going to be there. I'm definitely going to be there.
Yeah. Well, last year it landed on your birthday or something, didn't it?
Well, no. This is actually the first one that officially lands on my birthday.
Oh.
Because it's always been like a day or so after or before my birthday. This one, it's actually on my birthday, November 15th. I will definitely be there.
I talked to Johnny Monson. I made sure that we made it on your birthday this year.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And now, is Tyler the person you're making the cryptid book with or not? Is that a different program?
No.
No. I don't want my name attached to that. Are you kidding me?
I am doing a book on lesser known cryptids in Western Washington with my friend Valerie Heron.
Right.
I am writing essays. She is illustrating the book tentatively right now. It's called Kingdom of the Monsters. And, that's just a thing that we've been working on right now. Not much to report on that at the moment, but look forward to it.
Yeah. And so that's awesome. And one thing that I wanted to say is that last night I didn't have a live guest. I played a couple of different podcasts from Toby Johnson from.
And you had Toby, yeah, Toby on last night.
Yeah,
right.
And he gave me something to play as a of a thing, but then I found something that was wrong with it, and I don't, and it's not. It technically it's perfect, but the way that it's written, I have a feeling that somebody will latch on to the way a certain phrase is written about it, and then and make a big deal about it. But anyway, go to strangebrow.com, and he's having a thing on the 25th of October at the at a castle in Port Townsend, and Ron Moorhead's going to be there. Barb Shoup's going to be there. And a person who's the psychic detective for the L.A. County Sheriff is going to be there as well. And I wanted to say thanks, Toby, for letting me do that. And I'll tell you why I didn't want to play it later off air.
Okay.
But it's one of those. But
Toby's
it's
awesome.
yeah,
Toby's awesome.
Yeah.
He's a good.
Yeah, and so, but and if anybody's listening and wanting to listen to a good podcast, it's a Strange Brow Radio on Podbeam is where you find that. So I think that's kind of got everything out of the way as far as all the things that we're supposed to say. Tomorrow night, I have Russell Brinegar, and you will want. I think, Vince, you'll like this book that this man had. That he wrote. He wrote a book called Overlords of the Singularity, and you can get it on Kindle, and it's 600 pages of really tightly, well-researched stuff about Fortean type ideas. And so you guys will probably really both like that if you get a chance to do that. I want to thank you guys so much for being guests on the show, and I want to I will make sure that the September the 21st, if by hook or by crook, hopefully I can see you guys and have a drink with you or something. And that'll be.
You show up, I'll buy you a beer. That'll make it all worth it, right there.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and so maybe we can broadcast some live stuff from there too, and
please, everyone, go to flying-saucer-party.com.
Yeah,
and buy tickets there. Directions, find out our schedule, see what's happening. This is going to be the beginning of a grand tradition in Chehalis, Washington, celebrating one of the most important moments.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic stuff, and find it on Facebook. We have a link to it on our Facebook page, and which is We Are Paradox Media. Find it. Just become interested in it. Just do it. Just go. You've got nothing else to do that weekend. Go. All right, you guys. Peace out.
Thank you.
Peace out. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, guys. All right, let me just hit.